Okay, so you want to own a trailer park. A few acres on the edge of town, a couple dozen homes already sitting on it, and a lot rent check from every one of them landing in your account on the first of the month. You don't fix the homes. You don't paint them. You don't even own most of them. You just own the ground they can't move off of. It sounds almost too simple. That's the plan in your head, and it's not a bad plan. Drive through a well-run mobile home community, and it looks like the quietest business in the world. Homes people already own, sitting on land you own, paying you rent just to stay where they are. No tenants calling about a broken water heater, because the water heater isn't yours. No turnover, because nobody moves. You look at that and you think, 40 lots times $400 a month, and I barely have to do anything. This has to be the easiest cash flow in real estate. Here's the problem. The reason it's the easiest cash flow in real estate is also the reason it's one of the most uncomfortable businesses you can own. Because that simplicity is real, but it comes from a single hard fact that runs underneath everything. You are not renting apartments. You are renting dirt to people who own the house sitting on it, and that one difference changes the entire relationship between you and your tenant in a way that quietly favors you at every turn. The truth is that a trailer park is not really a housing business. It is a land-lease business that happens to have houses on it, and the product you actually sell is not a place to live. It's the impossibility of leaving. The moment you understand that, everything about how a trailer park makes money and why it makes people so uneasy starts to make sense. Let's start with the thing nobody outside the business understands, which is who owns what. In an apartment building, you own the building and you rent out the units. If a tenant leaves, you clean the unit, you repaint, and you find another. In a mobile home park, the model is inverted. In most parks, the resident owns their home outright, the actual physical structure, and they rent the small patch of land it sits on from you. That patch is called a lot, and what they pay you is called lot rent. So the tenant owns a house, and you own the ground under it. And here is where the magic, or the trap, depending on where you're standing, begins. A mobile home is called mobile, but that name is one of the great lies in American real estate. Once one of these homes is set up on a lot, skirted, connected to water, sewer, and power, with a porch and steps built on, it is not going anywhere. Moving a single mobile home to another park, if you can even find a park with an open lot willing to take it, commonly costs somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, and the home can be damaged or destroyed in the process. For a family living in a home worth $20,000 or $30,000, spending $10,000 to move it is not a real option, so they don't. Which means that if you own the land, you have a tenant who owns a house they physically cannot afford to move. Think about what that does to the normal balance of power between a landlord and a renter. In an apartment, an unhappy tenant leaves. That threat is the thing that disciplines the landlord. In a mobile home park, the unhappy tenant is trapped by the cost of moving the very thing they own. And a trapped tenant is, in the coldest financial language, a tenant with almost no ability to say no. This is the central inversion of the whole business. The customer's greatest asset, the home they own, is also the chain that keeps them on your land. And that is exactly why the cash flow is so stable, why turnover is so low, and why so much money has quietly flowed into this corner of real estate in the last 15 years. Now here's where the naive model breaks down. You think the expensive part is the homes, but you often don't even buy the homes. What you're really buying is the infrastructure under the ground, and it's the thing that can bankrupt you. When you buy a trailer park, in most cases you're buying the land, the roads, and the utility systems, the water lines, the sewer lines, and the electrical hookups that serve every lot. And a lot of these parks were built in the 1960s and 70s, which means the pipes in the ground are half a century old. Here's the trap. You cannot see them. You do a walkthrough. The homes look fine. The lot rent is coming in. The numbers look great. And then in year 2, a main sewer line collapses under the road, and you are looking at a repair that runs into the tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on infrastructure you can't see, serving homes you don't own. The two systems that terrify experienced park owners are private water wells and private sewer systems. If the park is on city water and city sewer, you're mostly fine. But many rural parks run on their own well and their own septic or treatment system. And if that system fails an inspection, the cost to bring it up to code or to connect the whole park to a distant municipal line can be 6 or 7 figures. That single line item has ended more first-time trailer park owners than any tenant ever has. Then there's the land itself. A functioning park sits on a few acres, and the price depends less on the dirt than on how many lots it has and what they rent for. A small 20 to 40 lot park in a rural area might sell for a few $100,000. A larger, well-located park with 100+ lots in a growing metro can sell for several million. And unlike almost any other asset we've looked at, the price is calculated almost entirely off one number: the lot rent multiplied by the number of occupied lots minus expenses, which means the entire value of your property is a direct function of how much rent you can push those trapped tenants to pay. So far, this is just cheap land with old pipes and captive tenants. Now let's talk about where the money actually comes from, because this is the part that explains everything else and is genuinely one of the highest margin structures in real estate. In a normal apartment building, a huge share of your rent gets eaten by expenses. You pay for the roof, the appliances, the heat, the turnover, the maintenance inside every unit. Property managers talk about an expense ratio, the percentage of your rent that gets consumed by running costs. And for apartments, it often runs 50% or higher. Half your rent gone before profit. In a mobile home park where residents own their own homes, your expense ratio can be dramatically lower, often in the 30 to 40% range, because you're not maintaining the homes. You're maintaining roads, some common utilities, and the grounds. The tenant maintains everything inside the fence line of their own lot because it's theirs. So a larger slice of every lot rent dollar falls straight to the bottom line. Adding the fact that these tenants almost never leave, so you have almost no turnover cost and almost no vacancy, and you have a machine that produces stable, low maintenance, high margin cash flow year after year. That combination, low expenses, low turnover, captive tenants, is why the naive owner sees free money. And that same combination is why the not-so-naive owner, the institutional buyer, saw something much bigger. Because here's the lever that turns a sleepy park into an investment. Lot rent, historically, was cheap. For decades, these parks were owned by mom-and-pop operators. Often the person who built the park, who lived nearby, knew the tenants by name and hadn't raised rent in years because these were their neighbors. So you'd find a park charging $250 a month for a lot in a market where it could easily be $400. That gap, the difference between what tenants are paying and what they could be made to pay, is the entire investment thesis. Picture two owners of the same park. The first is the retiring founder. He charges $250 a month. He fixes the road himself, and he lets it slide when someone's short 1 month, because he's known them for 20 years. He's making a modest living and he's happy. The second owner is whoever buys it from him. That new owner looks at the same 40 lots and sees 40 tenants, each of whom owns a home that costs $10,000 to move, each currently paying $150 below market. Raise every lot by $150 a month, and that's $6,000 more per month, $72,000 more per year on the same land with the same pipes from tenants who cannot leave. And because the value of the park is calculated off that rent number, raising the rent doesn't just increase your income. It increases the appraised value of the entire property, often by 10 or 15 times the annual rent increase. That's $72,000 a year of new rent can add $700,000 or more to what the park is worth. This is the engine. You buy an underpriced park from a soft-hearted founder. You raise the rents toward market on tenants who can't move, and the property's value multiplies. It is one of the most reliable value creation plays in all of real estate, and it works precisely because the tenants are trapped. Now, let's talk about the part that makes this business genuinely uncomfortable, because you can't understand the economics without it. Everything that makes a trailer park a wonderful investment, the low turnover, the captive tenants, the pricing power, comes directly from the vulnerability of the people who live there. Mobile home parks are one of the largest sources of unsubsidized affordable housing in the country. The people who live in them are often on fixed incomes, retirees, working families, priced out of everything else. They chose this because owning a modest home on rented land was the last affordable rung on the ladder. And the thing that makes them stable tenants, the fact that they own a home they can't afford to move, is the same thing that makes them unable to resist a rent increase. So when a new owner raises lot rent by 50%, the tenant's options are brutal. They can pay it, absorbing a hit to a budget that had no slack. They can try to sell the home, but a home is worth far less when the buyer knows the lot rent just jumped, and the park has a new owner with a reputation for raising it. Or they can abandon the home entirely, walking away from the single largest asset they own, because moving it costs more than it's worth. There is no clean exit. And a business where the customer has no clean exit is a business with extraordinary pricing power and an extraordinary weight on its conscience. This tension is not theoretical. It's the defining fact of the modern industry. Over the past 15 years, private equity firms, large investment funds, and even some of the biggest institutional investors in the world have moved into mobile home parks precisely because of this math. They roll up dozens or hundreds of parks, apply professional management, and push lot rents toward market, sometimes gently, sometimes not. In community after community, residents who thought they'd found permanent affordable housing have watched their lot rent climb year after year with nowhere to go. It has drawn the attention of lawmakers, tenant advocates, and journalists, and it has made trailer park economics a phrase that carries a lot more weight than it used to. Before we get to how this business actually breaks, there are hidden costs that catch the first-time owner who only saw the beautiful margin. The infrastructure we've covered is the big one, the aging water and sewer that you can't see. But there's also the problem of park-owned homes. Some parks come with a mix. Most residents own their homes, but the previous owner ended up owning a handful, homes that were abandoned or repossessed. The moment you own the home and not just a lot, you've re-entered the landlord business you were trying to avoid. Now you're fixing that home's roof, its plumbing, its furnace, and dealing with the turnover of the person renting it. Experienced buyers treat park-owned homes as a liability to be converted to resident-owned as fast as possible, because a lot you rent to a homeowner is a machine, and a home you rent to a renter is a job. Then there's the utility structure. In older parks, the owner often pays the entire water and sewer bill for the whole park out of the lot rent, which means if there's a leak under Lot 17 that nobody reports, you're paying for thousands of gallons of water running into the ground. This is why one of the first moves a professional operator makes is to sub-meter the park, installing individual water meters so each resident pays for their own usage. It cuts water waste dramatically, but it's also, in effect, another rent increase, because a cost the owner used to absorb is now billed back to the tenant. Then permitting and zoning, which is the quiet reason this whole asset class is so strange. Almost nobody builds new trailer parks anymore. Zoning boards across the country resist approving them because no town wants to be the town that added a trailer park, which means the supply is essentially fixed and slowly shrinking as older parks get sold to developers and paved over for apartments or retail. A fixed, shrinking supply of a product with captive demand is a recipe for rising prices, which is another reason the value of the surviving parks keeps climbing. So how does a business this stable, with tenants who can't leave, and a margin this fat, ever hurt the person who owns it? A few ways. And they're worth knowing before you fall in love with the cash flow. The first is the infrastructure catastrophe we've discussed, the six-figure sewer failure that wipes out years of profit in a single repair. The second is buying a park in a dying town. Captive tenants only stay captive if there are jobs nearby. If the one factory that town was built around closes, tenants leave regardless of the cost. They abandon homes, lots go vacant, and unlike a rent increase, an empty lot is very hard to refill because almost nobody is moving mobile homes into parks anymore. A park in a growing metro is a treasure. A park in a shrinking rural county can slowly empty out until it's worth less than you paid. The third is regulation. The very pricing power that makes this business attractive has become politically visible. A growing number of states and cities have introduced rent control on mobile home lots, notice requirements before rent increases, and right of first refusal laws that give residents a chance to collectively buy the park before it's sold to an investor. Buy a park expecting to push lot rent up 30%, and then discover your state just capped annual increases at a few percent, and your entire investment thesis evaporates. The captive tenant that makes this business work is also the sympathetic constituent that makes lawmakers act. So let's put it in plain mechanical terms. Take a 40-lot park where lot rent is $300 a month. 40 lots times 300 is $12,000 a month, $144,000 a year in gross rent. Apply a healthy 35% expense ratio and you keep about $94,000 in net operating income. If you bought that park for $1 million, that's a return on the price before any financing of around 9%, already better than most real estate. Now run the value add play. You raise lot rent from $300 to $400 over 2 years, market rate for the area. That's $40,000 more in annual rent, and after expenses, maybe $30,000 more in net operating income, bringing you to around $124,000 a year. At the multiples these parks trade for, that $30,000 income bump can raise the park's value by $300,000 to $400,000. You've added real wealth without touching a single home, purely by charging trapped tenants closer to what the market allows. That is the optimistic scenario, and it is completely real, and it happens constantly. Now the realistic scenario, where it goes wrong without anything exotic happening. You buy the same park, In year 2, the aging sewer system fails an inspection, and connecting to the municipal line costs $180,000, more than a year of gross rent. You raise lot rents to help cover it, but the town just passed a mobile home rent stabilization ordinance capping increases at 3%, so you can't. 2 tenants abandon their homes and leave, and you can't refill the lots because no one's moving homes in. The park you thought was a 9% machine is now a repair project, bleeding cash, on land whose value just fell because its income fell. Same lots, same tenants, same dirt, and the spreadsheet has completely inverted. The gap between those two outcomes on the identical property is enormous, and almost none of it shows up as a dramatic, visible event. No fire, no scandal. Just a cracked pipe under a road you can't see, an ordinance passed at a council meeting you didn't attend, and a town that lost the jobs that kept the tenants there, compounding quietly, until the appraisal comes back lower than the loan. So if you do buy a trailer park, understand exactly what you're buying, because it's the thing that makes this business both so profitable and so fraught. You're not buying homes. You're not really even buying land. You're buying the fact that the people living on it own something they can't afford to take with them. That's the moat. That's the margin. And that's the weight. The homes belong to the residents. The dirt belongs to you. And everything valuable about this business flows from the gap between the two.